The world had moved on, but Dongwon and Amara were still learning what it meant to be married for real. Life in the penthouse changed subtly. The staff no longer called her Madam with hesitation but with respect. Amara filled empty marble halls with little things. Her books stacked by the window, her soft sweaters draped over chairs, a new smell of African coffee she ordered from back home. For the first time, the palace in the sky felt lived in. Dongwon, once consumed by endless meetings, found himself drawn home earlier than ever. He told himself it was responsibility, but he knew the truth. It was her smile when she greeted him at the door, the way she listened when he talked about battles at the board, or how she simply touched his sleeve when his shoulders were tense. But love, however real, was not free of challenge. 2 months after the private ceremony, Amara received a letter from her university. Her scholarship had been revoked. Conflict of interest, they claimed. Whispers said Eugene's family had pressured the institution. Without it, her visa would be questioned, her studies jeopardized. She broke the news to Dongwon over breakfast, her voice quiet, as if saying it softer would make it less true. "I don't belong here," she murmured. "Even my dreams are being taken away." Dongwon set down his coffee, his gaze darkening. "Your dreams are mine now too. If they close doors, I'll build you new ones." But Amara shook her head. "This isn't about money, Dongwon. I don't want to be the girl the world says was rescued by her husband. I need to stand on my own." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they revealed how fragile her sense of belonging still was. Dongwon realized then, he could protect her from enemies, but not from her own doubt. So, for the first time, he stepped back. He let her fight for herself. Amara threw herself into work, volunteering as a translator for immigrant families, tutoring children after school, applying for programs that didn't care about her last name or who she married. Each evening she came home exhausted, yet radiant in a way money could never buy. Dongwon watched quietly, pride swelling, even as a small ache grew in him. She was building an identity apart from him, and he feared one day she might walk away, choosing her freedom over him. Then came the night that fear broke. Amara returned home late, her clothes damp from a sudden downpour. She found Dongwon waiting, the city skyline at his back, his usually composed face raw with something she hadn't seen before, fear. "Do you regret this?" he asked suddenly. His voice was rough, stripped of all the confidence he wore in public. "Do you regret us?" Amara froze, droplets of rain trailing down her cheek like tears. Then she crossed the room, slowly, deliberately, until she stood before him. She cupped his face in her hands, soft against the steel of his jaw. "Dongwon," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You gave me a home when I felt lost. You gave me courage when I doubted myself. I don't regret you. I only regret that I sometimes make you think I could." His breath shuddered out, relief flooding his features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he could never let go. That night, they crossed the final threshold between pretending and reality. For Amara, untouched and untried, it was frightening, until his patience reminded her of his promise. No pressure, only love. For Dongwon, it was surrender. Not of control, but of a heart he had once thought untouchable. The morning after, the city was the same. Cold, ambitious, hungry. But their world had changed. They were no longer billionaire and student, protector and protected. They were simply husband and wife. But outside their quiet haven, new storms gathered. Eugene's family, humiliated and weakened, was plotting a comeback. And in the shadows of Seoul's corporate battlefield, enemies who envied Dongwon's empire were waiting for the right moment to strike. And this time, they wouldn't just come for his company. They would come for his wife. The storm arrived sooner than expected. One crisp autumn morning, Dongwon was in the middle of a board meeting when the large screens in the conference room lit up with breaking news. Kong Group accused of illegal overseas contracts. Anonymous whistleblower leaks documents. The board erupted in panic. Investors flooded his phone. Stock prices dipped in real time. Dongwon kept his face calm, but his pulse thundered. He knew immediately this wasn't coincidence. It was Eugene's family striking back, using their influence to orchestrate a scandal that could cripple him. That evening, he returned home later than usual, his tie undone, his jaw tight. Amara noticed the fatigue in his eyes before he said a word. "What happened?" she asked, setting down the book in her lap. He hesitated. He had always shouldered the weight of his empire alone. But something about her gaze, steady, unflinching, made him tell her everything. When he finished, Amara was silent for a moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "Then fight," she said simply. "But don't fight the way they expect you to." Dongwon frowned. "What do you mean? You said once that I was your freedom. Then let me stand with you. Don't hide me away like a secret. Use what they see as weakness, our marriage, me being the outsider, to prove them wrong." Her words struck him like lightning. All his life, power had been about dominance. But Amara was teaching him another kind of strength, vulnerability as defiance. The next day, Dongwon did the unthinkable. He brought Amara to the front lines of the battle. He arrived at a high-profile economic forum, hand in hand with her, ignoring the gasps and flashing cameras. When reporters pressed about the allegations, he didn't answer with numbers or denials. Instead, he placed a protective arm around Amara and said, "My enemies think they can destroy me by attacking my wife. But if they believe love is my weakness, then they've already lost. Because love is the one thing I will never bargain away." The room went still. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a declaration of war. Behind the scenes, Eugene's father seethed. His plan had been simple: crush Dongwon by painting him as corrupt and unfit to lead. But Dongwon's public display flipped the narrative. Instead of doubt, the people admired him more. Stock prices began to rebound. Amara, however, wasn't untouched by the storm. Threatening letters arrived at the penthouse. Anonymous messages told her to leave Dongwon before it's too late. Some nights, she lay awake, wondering if loving him had painted a target on her back. One night, unable to sleep, she found Dongwon on the balcony, staring out at the city. His hand rested on the railing, but his eyes were elsewhere, calculating, furious. "Dongwon," she whispered, touching his sleeve. "What if they come for me?" He turned, his expression softening instantly. He drew her into his chest, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then they'll learn what it means to touch what's mine." His voice was a vow, cold to the world, but burning for her. From that moment, Amara realized this wasn't just his fight, it was theirs. And if the powerful families of Seoul wanted war, she would not be the girl hiding in the shadows. She would stand beside him no matter the cost. The first strike against her came quietly. Amara was walking back from the language center one evening, carrying folders from her volunteer work, when she noticed a black trailing her down the narrow street. Her chest tightened. She tried to shake it by slipping into a convenience store, pretending to browse. But when she stepped back outside, the car was still there. A man in a dark coat stepped out. His voice was low, oily. "Mrs. Kong, a word?" Fear froze her, but she forced her chin up. "Who are you?" "You should leave Seoul," the man said, slipping a sealed envelope into her hands. "For your safety, for your husband's sake." Her heart pounded as he returned to the car and vanished into traffic. When she opened the envelope later in the penthouse, her blood ran cold. Inside were photos, grainy but unmistakable, of her walking alone, her classrooms, even shots taken from outside the penthouse gates. Someone was watching her. Dongwon's reaction was swift. He scanned the photos once, his jaw set like stone, then tore them in half. "They won't touch you," he growled. "I'll double security." But Amara caught his wrist before he stormed off. "Dongwon, if this is about me, then hiding me won't fix it. They want me gone because they know I scare them." He stared at her, startled. "Scare them?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm the piece they can't control. The foreign wife, the ordinary student who doesn't fit their world. If I can stand by you, if I refuse to disappear, then their power means nothing." Dongwon was silent for a long moment. Then he reached for her face, brushing his thumb against her cheek. "You were supposed to be my weakness," he whispered. "Instead, you're becoming my weapon." The true breaking point came a week later. Dong-won was in a late-night strategy meeting when his phone buzzed violently. It was his head of security. "Sir, it's your wife. We've lost contact. She never returned from her class. Her phone is off." For the first time in years, Dong-won felt his blood turn to ice. He didn't wait for explanations. He tore out of the building, his convoy racing through Seoul's midnight streets. Amara was gone. Hours later, a message arrived. A video of Amara bound to a chair in a dim warehouse, her eyes wide but defiant. A distorted voice snarled through the speaker. "Step down, Kang Dong-won. Dissolve your holdings, or your wife disappears forever." Dong-won's fists clenched, his knuckles white. Around him, his executives panicked, shouting about negotiations, about the board, about losses. But Dong-won's voice cut through the chaos, cold and lethal. "No one touches her, and no one dictates terms to me." His men had seen him ruthless in business. But this time they saw something else, something terrifying. This wasn't the CEO speaking. This was a man ready to burn down the city for the woman he loved. And for Amara, tied in the shadows, the battle for survival was only just beginning. The warehouse stank of oil and damp steel. Amara's wrists burned where the ropes bit into her skin, but her eyes remained steady on the masked men circling her. "Your husband will fold," one of them sneered. "He always does when money's on the line." Amara almost laughed, despite the fear coiled in her stomach. "Then you don't know him at all." The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected tears, begging, maybe bargaining. But she sat tall, unbroken, and that unsettled them more than her silence. Meanwhile, across Seoul, Dong-won was already moving like a storm. His private team, former military men loyal only to him, had traced the video feed back to the docks. Inside the convoy, Dong-won loaded a gun with the precision of a man who had never forgotten his time fighting through Korea's brutal business underworld. His right-hand man, Min Jae, glanced at him. "Boss, if you go in like this, there's no turning back. They'll retaliate tenfold." Dong-won's reply was ice. "Let them. They touched my wife." The kidnappers never heard the first shots. Silenced rounds picked off the guards outside the warehouse. The door burst open with a crash, and chaos exploded. Amara ducked as the masked men scrambled for weapons. Gunfire cracked, shouts filled the air. Then, in the blur of smoke and shadows, she saw him, Dong-won, dressed in black, his eyes blazing like fire. "Dong-won!" she cried. He didn't hesitate. He cut through the kidnappers with a precision that was terrifying, every move calculated, merciless. When he reached her, he tore the ropes from her wrists and pulled her into his chest. For a moment, the world fell silent. His hand cradled her face as if confirming she was real. "I told you," he whispered fiercely. "No one touches you." But the danger wasn't over. Behind them, one of the masked men staggered to his feet, raising a gun. Amara saw it before Dong-won did. Without thinking, she grabbed a steel pipe from the floor and swung with all her strength. The man crumpled instantly. Dong-won froze, staring at her in shock. Then, slowly, a dark smile curved his lips. "That's my wife." By dawn, the docks were silent. The Kong convoy disappeared into the city, leaving nothing but wreckage. In the penthouse, Amara sat on the sofa, her hands still trembling. Dong-won knelt before her, cleaning the raw burns on her wrists himself. His usual arrogance was gone. Only fierce tenderness remained. "You shouldn't have had to fight," he murmured. "And you shouldn't have had to kill," she whispered back. "But we did. Together." Their eyes locked, something unspoken burning between them. That night, when he finally pulled her into his arms, it wasn't just relief. It was a vow. Their bond had been forged in blood, and no force in Seoul could break it now. But in the shadows of the city, Eugene's father raged. The failed kidnapping had only deepened his obsession. If Dong-won and Amara could not be broken, then they would have to be destroyed. Utterly. The war was only just beginning. The morning after the rescue, Seoul's headlines exploded. Unidentified armed clash at docks. Kang Group allegedly involved. Who is the mystery wife standing beside Kang Dong-won? Photos of Dong-won carrying Amara out of the warehouse spread like wildfire. Some saw it as scandalous. Others saw it as legendary. But for the old money elites, it was humiliation. Dong-won had survived, and worse, he had turned his love for Amara into a public symbol of defiance. At Kang headquarters, the board begged him to keep a low profile. Chairman Kang, the Yu family has deep ties to prosecutors. If you escalate, Dong-won silenced them with one sharp look. They tried to kidnap my wife. This is no longer business. It's war. Meanwhile, Amara struggled with the whirlwind around her. Students at her language center whispered when she entered. Strangers took photos of her on the street. And at night, when she closed her eyes, she could still smell the oil of the warehouse, hear the rasp of ropes against her skin. One evening, she found Dong-won on the balcony again, pouring himself a drink. His tie was loosened, his face shadowed with exhaustion. "You're burning yourself out," she said softly. He turned, eyes hard. "If I don't strike first, they'll come for you again." Amara stepped closer, laying her hand on his chest. "Then let me be your strength, not your fear. Don't fight because you're afraid of losing me. Fight because you know we're stronger together." For a long time, he just stared at her, the woman who had walked into his world as a stranger, and now stood as the only anchor he trusted. Then, for the first time in days, his shoulders eased. He kissed her, slow and desperate, as if drawing life from her lips. The counterstrike came swiftly. Within a week, confidential files from Eugene's family business leaked to the press: tax evasion, offshore accounts, political bribes. Stock prices plummeted. Prosecutors announced an investigation. The Yu family retaliated, dragging Kang Group into legal battles, staging smear campaigns against Amara, calling her a foreign distraction corrupting the empire. Instead of hiding, Amara faced the cameras herself. At a press conference, she spoke in her clear, accented Korean. "They want to shame me because I don't belong to their world. But I belong to my husband and he belongs to me. That is stronger than any scandal." Her words sent shockwaves across Seoul. Ordinary people admired her courage, and support for Kang Group surged. But the Yu family wasn't finished. One night, as Dong-won and Amara left a charity gala, a black SUV rammed their car. Windows shattered, guards scrambled, chaos erupted. Amid the wreckage, Dong-won shielded Amara with his own body as armed men closed in. The war had left the shadows. Now it was blood on the streets. And for Dong-won, there was no turning back. If Seoul wanted to test how far he would go for the woman he loved, the city was about to find out. The attack on their car was the spark that set Seoul ablaze. Dong-won's convoy fought its way out, bullets ringing across the darkened boulevard. Glass crunched beneath tires as his men pulled Amara into a second vehicle and sped away. But the message was clear. The Yu family had abandoned subtlety. This was an open blood feud. That night, in the hidden bunker beneath Kang headquarters, Dong-won gathered his most trusted lieutenants. Maps, photos, and surveillance feeds littered the table. "This ends tonight," he said, voice low but edged with steel. "I will not wait for them to come again. We strike at their heart." Min-jae frowned. "Boss, their alliances run deep. Police, prosecutors, half the city council. If we move recklessly, then we move with precision." Dong-won cut in. His gaze slid toward Amara, who stood silently near the wall, arms crossed. "And this time, we don't underestimate them." Later, when they were alone, Amara confronted him. "You're planning to destroy them, aren't you?" Dong-won didn't deny it. He paced the room, his hands balled into fists. "They won't stop until you're gone. I have no choice." "You do," she said firmly. "You can fight smart. You have evidence, allies, public sympathy. You don't need to turn Seoul into a battlefield." His eyes burned into hers. "And if they take you again? If one bullet finds you, what then, Amara?" She stepped forward, placing her palm on his chest, steadying the storm inside him. Then I'll fight too. Stop treating me like porcelain, Dongwon. I'm already part of this war. For a long moment he searched her face. Then, slowly, his anger shifted into something else, admiration. You're not afraid of me anymore, he murmured. I never was, she whispered back. I was afraid of losing you. The war erupted 3 nights later. Kong loyalists swept through warehouses and safe houses, dismantling the Yu family's operations piece by piece. At one dock, Amara herself walked beside Dongwa, a bulletproof vest strapped to her chest, her eyes sharp. The men whispered at the sight of her, but Dongwon made no apology. This is my wife, he told them, his voice carrying. She fights with me. She stands with me. Anyone who has a problem with that, walk out now. No one moved. By dawn, half the Yu family's empire was in flames. But victory came at a price. A traitor within Kong Group had leaked their plans, costing lives. And at the center of it all, Eugene herself resurfaced, her voice dripping with venom on national television. Kong Dongwon pretends to be noble, but he's nothing but a criminal hiding behind a foreign wife. Seoul deserves better. The city teetered between awe and outrage. Some saw Dongwon and Amara as untouchable modern legends. Others demanded their downfall. For Dongwon, the path was clear. He wouldn't just crush the Yu family's businesses. He would rip out their roots. And Amara, no longer a bystander, was ready to fight at his side, even if it meant standing against the whole city. The war burned on, but Dongwon could feel it. Every step he took, the Yu family seemed prepared, one step ahead. It wasn't a coincidence. It was betrayal. One night, during a raid on a Yu-controlled casino, the ambush was too perfect. Grenades rained from the roof, cutting down men Dongwon had trusted for years. He barely dragged Amara out through a side exit, blood spattering his sleeve as they ran into the shadows. Back at headquarters, Dongwon slammed a fist into the table, splintering the wood. There's a rat, he snarled. His men stood silent, not daring to breathe. Min-jae whispered, Do you think it's someone close? Dongwon's eyes narrowed, dark as midnight. Closer than we want to believe. Amara noticed it first. In the days that followed, she saw how certain plans leaked too quickly, how meetings shifted strangely, how one man, Director Han, an older executive who had served Kong Group for decades, always avoided her gaze. One afternoon, while Dongwon was away handling negotiations, Amara followed her instincts. She trailed Han discreetly, her heart hammering. To her shock, she found him in a quiet cafe, sliding a USB drive across the table to a man in a gray suit. She didn't wait. She pulled out her phone, snapped a picture, and slipped away before they saw her. When she returned to the penthouse, Dongwon was already home, his shirt undone, stress lining his face. She laid the phone on the table in front of him. He stared at the photo, then at her. His jaw tightened. You shouldn't have been there, he said quietly. And if I hadn't, you'd still trust him, Amara shot back. Dongwon, this man is bleeding you from the inside. He's the reason they always know where you are. For a moment, silence crackled between them. Then, slowly, Dongwon's expression changed. The fury in his eyes wasn't for her. It was for the betrayal. He stood, brushing a hand over her cheek. You've saved me again, he murmured. But now, I have to do what I've avoided for too long. The next night, Dongwon summoned Director Han to a private meeting. Amara wanted to go, but he told her gently, Not this time. His tone was final. Hours later, he returned, his hands still stained with blood, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. Amara's breath caught. You! It's done, he said flatly, cutting her off. The traitor is gone. He sank into the chair opposite her, exhaustion etched into his bones. Then, for the first time, his voice cracked. I've killed for this empire before, but tonight, I only killed for you. Amara crossed the room and sank onto his lap, her arms wrapping tightly around him. She didn't flinch from the blood. She didn't judge. She only whispered, Then we'll carry it together. But the Yu family wasn't finished. Han's betrayal had cost Kong Group dearly, and Eugene knew it. With the traitor gone, their next move wouldn't be subtle. They would come directly for Amara. And this time, not even Dongwon's iron will might be enough to shield her. One late evening, as Amara returned from her language class, black vans screeched onto the street. Masked men poured out, dragging her into the shadows. She fought, screamed, but a cloth pressed to her face drowned her world in darkness. When she woke, Eugene was standing before her, flawless, cold, and venomous. "You should have stayed in the shadows, Amara," she sneered. "Men like Dongwon don't choose women like you. But don't worry, I'll send him your body, and then his empire will be mine." Amara's heart raced, fear clawing her chest. But before Eugene could finish her threat, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Dongwon stormed in, his men at his back, eyes blazing like fire. "Touch her," he growled, his gun aimed steady, "and I'll burn your family to the ground." Chaos erupted. Bullets flew, men fell, smoke filled the air. Amid the storm, Dongwon cut through the enemy with ruthless precision, until at last he reached Amara. He tore the ropes from her wrists, pulling her close. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. Her eyes welled with tears. "You came for me." "Always," he whispered. Eugene, trembling with rage, raised a gun. "If I can't have you, no one will." The shot rang out, but Dongwon moved faster. He pulled Amara into his arms, shielding her. The bullet grazed his shoulder, blood seeping through his suit. He didn't flinch, only tightened his hold. His men disarmed Eugene within seconds, dragging her away screaming. Amara pressed her hands to his wound, sobbing. "Dongwon, you're bleeding." He cupped her cheek with his free hand, smiling faintly despite the pain. "As long as you're safe, nothing else matters." Weeks later, the war was over. The Yu family's empire collapsed, their assets seized, their influence shattered. Dongwon emerged victorious, but he credited his survival not to power or wealth, but to the woman who had given him strength. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.